everybody. My name is Sylvana Candela. I'm a licensed acupuncturist, author, and book publisher. And I make videos talking about all kinds of health issues, healing. And at the moment, I have decided to focus more on issues involving autism and the autistic spectrum. And the reason I've decided to do this is one, the first one I did got a very nice response from everybody I know, and most people. And also, I think it's really important as the medical model of autism is continuously evolving, that those of us who are on the spectrum and a bit older, like myself, really, I feel, have an obligation to come out and share our own experiences. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to. But for those of us who feel moved to do so, that's a pretty good indication that we should. And I feel that I need to. So I'm going to do that. And, I may share other things as well, as I go along. I haven't decided where I'm going with this, just where I'm at the moment. And this feels right. And it feels like what you, my viewers, are asking me and my friends to do. So first I'll say that today's topic that I'm going to focus on is autism and regarding communication and language. And the reason I feel this is so important is because it seems to be a greatly misunderstood aspect of people on the spectrum and how very varied we can be in our communication and language skills. So I wanted to address that today. For a long time, it's what kept me from understanding my own part in being on the spectrum, who I am, because I didn't understand that, as many people don't, that they're like everything else on the autistic spectrum, language and communication has a very wide, diverse bunch of character traits, that some of us have on one end and some on the other end, every variation in between. Like the saying goes, and I will keep repeating it, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. That's how different we are. So we need to look at, well, what are our commonalities as well as what are our unique, individual traits. Okay, so the anecdotal evidence in general for people I would say anybody who's neurodiverse in an evolving medical model is very important, that anecdotal evidence, because we really need to help the medical community and everybody around us, and ourselves included, understand who we are and what this is about. And why that's so important is, I feel, as many of us do, not all, but many people do, that to know yourself is a very healing part of you're not going to get over, you're not going to stop being autistic, but it's a healing part of the anxiety and all the difficulties that we deal with in society, the hypersensitivity, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about today as well. So we need to do that. We do need to share our personal experiences, either one-on-one with each other, and just to understand, what's going on in here. What is that? What's all that about? And it really helps to understand. It helps very much. So the first thing I'd like to do with communication and language skills is to separate them. Because what I see and what I hear in the medical model is that they tend to be lumped together, and especially in autism, where the typical model from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s of what language skills look like in autistic people is nonverbal or very little verbal, and there seems to be like we have this lack of understanding lack of empathy and all of that stuff. And so before I kind of get into all that, I just like to say that there is a huge difference between language skills, and the ability to communicate or understand what's going on and how we express that. There's a huge difference between the two. Language skills is what we see, how you present your ability to speak. And even on the spectrum, as Sarah Hendricks says, and she's wonderful, you got to listen to her stuff as a woman on the spectrum. She herself began speaking full sentences by 9 months old. And then there are people who never speak. So it's every variation in between. So you really can't judge by somebody's language skills or the lack thereof whether or not they're on the spectrum, because that could be due to a number of things, you know, regardless. Um, so Sarah talks about that, and I got a lot out of listening to her. And basically, she also talks about how, people who are uh, who are very verbal and Paul Micallef on his channel, Autism from the Inside, or Asperger's from the Inside. I think he calls it one or the other. He says the same thing, that you can be a shy introvert person on the spectrum, or on the other extreme, you can be an oversharer. I didn't know that existed, that term. But Sarah talks about that, and Paul talks about that too a lot. And what does oversharing look like? Well, it looks like when you ask somebody a question like, how are you? Typically you'd say, I'm all right, I'm fine, whatever, or not. But not to go on and on for 10 minutes to answer that question, and to go into a whole dialogue, a whole monologue, basically, about how you are and why you are and what you are and all these other things. That's called oversharing. And the person just like, I just wanted to making small talk, how are you? I'm fine, or not. So that's one aspect of the spectrum, people who overshare. And of course, we're all familiar with the other aspect, which is very little to no communication at all, language skills. Okay. So the communication itself, though, is, I think I would have to say that most autistic people, and don't quote me on this because I don't know any statistics on this or whatever, just from what I've observed and learned and experienced in my own life and with others on the spectrum, um, we do tend to know how to communicate. And I've noticed even nonverbal people. I used to teach autistic children many years ago in my ancient past. And I knew what they were trying to say, and I knew what they wanted. And we all have ways of communicating, even if it's nonverbal, or if it's weird verbal or inappropriate verbal, or whatever. So that's the difference, really, that we can, I can read somebody else's body language very easily, and that's something else that is misunderstood, and the professionals, the medical model says we can't. Yeah, we can. At least, I can. And I know most of the people I know who are on the spectrum also can. We do read each other. And that's another thing that I have understood, that I've been hearing, is that autistic people tend to communicate really well with each other, better. And I think that's because that we understand each other and have great empathy for each other. And we understand, we get it. It's like you get it. This is your tribe. You understand what the person is trying to say, and because you've been there, you know what it feels like. And one other thing that I'll mention here is that in regards to communication, this I believe also has to do with your sensitivity and your emotional maturity. Both of those things. So we have everything, and I'll talk about sensitivity in another video, But there's hyposensitive, people who are not very sensitive, way to the other extreme. I'm talking about emotionally, of being super hyper sensitive emotionally to the point, like I am, of being very empathic, very empathic. I don't care, if somebody's on the spectrum or not. But, there's a great variation, a huge variation in that. And, people who are on the spectrum can very often, like me, super read other people to the point where it hurts, where I don't want to know that, just take your energy somewhere else. Um, but that's part of it, and that's a communication thing too. And one other thing I'll mention that has a lot to do with everything here and communication and many other things. It has been said in the medical model, the recent one, that autistic people tend to not mature emotionally beyond the age of 14 or 15. With any luck, I've heard it say 16. I don't know how much that's been researched, although it is out there as part of the medical model that I've heard. But I tend to agree with it for myself. I know that, with my hypersensitivity and everything else, um, I feel that there's a part of me that has a very childlike quality inside, and for better or worse, um, I don't feel like my physical age at all. And, my body, of course, tells me I am with my physical ailments and whatnot, with the usual things that happen as you get older. But that is something that you might want to consider because, it also would affect, of course, how you communicate. If you're basically a teenager inside, you know. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. If you like what you hear, please hit the like and subscribe button and do share this with others. That would be wonderful. And let me know in your comments what you think, what you'd like to hear. I know people have been letting me know that, just by emailing, texting, or whatever. That's fine too. So I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, blessed day. And thank you for listening. Take care.